Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to be a warm family gathering, but instead, it turned into the night my mom disowned me in front of everyone. As we sat around the table, plates still full of turkey and mashed potatoes, my mom stood up and tapped her glass to get everyone's attention. She smiled and said, "I just want to share something important." I had a bad feeling. She looked at me, then at my older brother, Daniel, who was already smirking. Then she dropped the bombshell. "When I pass away, everything I own, my house, my money, my investments, will go to Daniel, because you, Alex, don't deserve anything." The table went silent. Daniel leaned back, looking pleased with himself. I wasn't surprised. My mom had always favored him. He was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was treated like an outsider. I clenched my fists. "Are you serious?" She nodded. "You never listen to me. You don't appreciate me like Daniel does." I scoffed. "You mean because I don't worship you?" Her smile faded. "Because you're ungrateful and selfish." My family shifted uncomfortably, but Daniel spoke up. "Sounds fair to me. I've been here for Mom. You just left and did your own thing." "Yeah, I moved out, to escape being treated like garbage. I worked hard to build my own life." Meanwhile, Daniel, 38 years old and unemployed, still lived at home, never paying a bill. Then, my grandmother cleared her throat. Everyone turned to look at her. She was 94, but still sharp. A man standing behind her, a lawyer, pulled out some documents. My mom's smile disappeared. "What do you mean?" she asked. Grandma placed her hands on the table. "You don't own this house, Margaret. You never did." The room fell silent. I frowned. "What do you mean?" Grandma nodded to the lawyer, who pulled out a thick stack of papers. "This house and all the money you're trying to give away, none of it is yours." My mom's face turned pale. Daniel sat up, looking worried. The lawyer flipped through the pages. "This property was placed into an irrevocable trust in 1976. Margaret, you never legally owned this house. Your mother does, and she decides who inherits it." Daniel's smirk vanished. "What?" Grandma smiled. "And I've already made my decision." The lawyer continued. "As per the trust, the rightful heir of this house and all assets is Alex." I actually laughed. "What?" my mother shouted. Daniel jumped out of his chair. "No, this is my house." The lawyer shook his head. "No, it isn't. Your grandfather set this up years ago, and your grandmother has full control. She has chosen Alex." Daniel was furious. My mother looked like she had seen a ghost. "And my grandmother?" She just smiled. My mom spoke up. "I've raised my children here." Grandma turned to her and said, "Oh, is that what you think?" Her voice sounded different, sharper. "Margaret, you never paid for this house. Your father and I did. We let you live here because we thought you'd take care of it. But do you know what we found out?" Grandma leaned forward. "You took out loans against it." My heart sank. People at the table gasped. My mom looked like she had been hit. "That's not true," she shouted. "I don't know what you're talking about." The lawyer turned a page and read, "Over the last 15 years, you've taken out loans using this house as collateral. The total is over $250,000. "No," my mom cried, slamming her hands on the table. "That's a lie." The lawyer kept reading. "You defaulted on many of these loans, and liens were placed on the house. Last year, you tried to take out another $50,000, but it was denied because the house doesn't legally belong to you." My mom's face went pale. She looked at Daniel, desperate. Daniel looked scared, which I had never seen before. "Mom, is this true?" he asked. She didn't answer. Grandma sighed and leaned back in her chair. "You lied to your son. You let him think everything was his, while you tried to drain the house for all it's worth." Then, the surprise we didn't expect, Daniel suddenly yelled, "This isn't fair. I've done everything for you, Mom. I stayed here. I took care of you, and now you're telling me I get nothing?" The lawyer slid a paper across the table. "Your grandmother has given you a choice." Daniel grabbed the paper and read it quickly. His face twisted in anger. "This is a joke." "What is it?" I asked. Grandma folded her hands. "I'm offering Daniel $50,000, but only if he leaves the house immediately and never contacts me again." The room went silent. Daniel looked shocked. "You're kicking me out, Grandma?" My mom gasped. "You can't do that." "I can," Grandma said calmly. "You thought you could give everything to Daniel, but none of this was ever yours to give. You've been living in my house, and now my generosity is over." Daniel turned to my mom. "Mom, say something. Don't let her do this. But my mom just sat there, frozen, realizing her plan was falling apart. Daniel turned back to the lawyer. I'm not leaving. You can't make me. The lawyer nodded. That's your choice, but if you don't take the payout, we will begin the eviction process. Daniel was stunned. Eviction? You can't evict me. The lawyer flipped through some papers. According to the law, you're a tenant. You haven't contributed to the house in over 10 years. Since the house now belongs to your grandmother, she has the right to remove you. Daniel looked at me, pleading, you wouldn't do this to me, right, Alex? We're brothers. I just stared at him. After all the years of being treated like nothing, watching him get everything, I was finally in control. Daniel sat there, gripping the paper, his knuckles white. My mom was still frozen, her mouth open. I could see it in her eyes. She never saw this coming. She thought Thanksgiving would be her time to humiliate me and hand everything to Daniel, but it was all falling apart. Daniel shoved his chair back. This is crazy. No, Grandma said calmly, this is justice. Daniel turned to me, furious. This isn't fair, Alex. I've lived here my whole life. I leaned back in my chair, feeling power for the first time in years. Funny, I said. You didn't care about fairness when Mom was trying to cut me out. Daniel's face reddened. This is different. No, it isn't. After years of being ignored and treated unfairly, it was finally my turn. The lawyer slid another paper to Daniel. You have 30 days to leave, or we'll begin the eviction process. Daniel grabbed the paper and crumpled it. I'm not leaving. The room was silent. Then Grandma chuckled. Oh, Daniel, you always thought you could get your way. She took a sip of her tea. But you forget. I have raised my children here. My grandmother slowly turned to look at my mother. Oh, is that what you think? Her voice had a sharp edge I had never heard before. Margaret, you never paid a single cent for this house. Your father and I did. We let you live here because we trusted you to be responsible and treat this house with respect. But guess what we found out? She leaned forward, her wrinkled hands resting on the table. You took out loans against it. My stomach dropped. A few people at the table gasped. My mother flinched, as if she had been hit. That's not true, my mother suddenly shrieked. Is it? The lawyer pulled out another document and set it on the table. Daniel lunged for it, but I was faster. I grabbed it and scanned the page, and my jaw dropped. Oh my God, I whispered. I looked at Daniel, then at my mother. I couldn't speak because what I saw was worse than I ever imagined. Daniel had taken out a second mortgage on the house, and he did it behind my mother's back. Daniel, you forged Mom's signature, I accused. Daniel's face was sweaty. I thought bitterly. It didn't even matter, Mom was supposed to inherit everything anyway. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to explode, but she just sat there, shaking as if she might faint. She knew that once the house officially transferred to me, Daniel's crime would become my problem, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt on my property. Then it hit me. I asked my grandmother, you knew about this before tonight, didn't you? Her lips curled into a small smile. Of course I did. That's why I made sure the house went to you. My breath caught. What? Why would you do that? Because I knew what they would do to you if I didn't. They would drain this house for every last penny, sell it, and leave you with nothing. I refused to let that happen. I sat back, heart pounding. This wasn't just about an inheritance anymore, it was war. I'll fight this, Daniel hissed. I'll fight all of it. The lawyer calmly pulled out one last document. You already lost, he declared. Daniel snatched it and read quickly, his hands trembling. Then he screamed, no, 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 slamming the paper on the table. His face turned red with rage. I picked it up and read it, and I almost laughed because it was so clever. My grandmother had been one step ahead all along. The document was a court order. Daniel, you don't just owe money on this house, she said firmly, you committed fraud. Daniel shook his head violently. No, no, you can't do this. Oh, but I can. The bank already knows about your stunt, and so do the authorities. If you don't accept the payout and leave quietly, they will press charges. His face went completely pale as he realized this wasn't just about losing the house, it was about losing his freedom. You have 48 hours to decide, the lawyer said smoothly. Take the payout and walk away, or refuse and we go to the police. My mother suddenly burst into tears. Please, Mom, don't do this. He's your grandson. My grandmother didn't even blink. No, he stopped being my grandson the moment he stole from his own family. Silence filled the room. Daniel looked defeated. And I just sat back because it was over. This was justice, and my grandmother was the most ruthless woman I had ever known. For a few long moments, the room was completely quiet. Daniel stared at the contract, his hands shaking. My mother sobbed into her napkin, completely broken. My grandmother remained calm, as if she had always known this would be the end. "So, what's it going to be, Daniel?" she asked. Daniel opened his mouth then closed it again, his eyes darting around for a way out. Then I saw that desperate look. "No," he suddenly shouted, shoving his chair back. "I'm not leaving, you can't do this to me." Before anyone could react, he grabbed the papers and tore them in half. Everyone gasped. "You think you can just erase me? I'll burn this house down before you take it," he snapped. Then, out of nowhere, he lunged at me. I barely had time to react before he grabbed my shirt and yanked me so hard my chair nearly toppled. "You don't deserve this, I'm the rightful owner," he yelled. He even spat on my face, and his grip was tight, until suddenly, with a crack, he stumbled back, clutching his face. My grandmother slapped him hard, and her voice boomed through the room. Daniel just stared at her in shock. Then she turned to the lawyer and said, "Call the police." Daniel froze. "What? I gave you a choice, you threw it away, so now you get the other option." The lawyer had already pulled out his phone. Daniel's face twisted in panic. Wait, okay, I'll take the money, I'll leave." Too late, he continued as sirens sounded in the distance. Daniel turned to my mother. "Mom, do something," but for the first time, my mother had nothing to say. She just shook her head. She knew it was all his own fault. Just 10 minutes later, Daniel was dragged out of the house in handcuffs. He screamed, begged, and shouted, "This isn't fair, you're ruining my life," but no one helped him. I stood on the porch, watching as they pushed him into the police car. "No, Daniel," I said calmly, "you ruined it yourself." The door slammed shut, the car drove away, and just like that, he was gone. I took a deep breath. For the first time, I felt free. Daniel was charged with fraud. It turned out he had forged signatures before. The bank had been building a case against him for months. My grandmother sped up the process, and he ended up serving time. My mother tried to fight back. She screamed, cried, and begged my grandmother to reconsider, but my grandmother was done. She gave my mother one last chance. "You can stay in this house for 6 more months. After that, you leave, or Alex will have you evicted." My mother left soon after and moved into a small apartment across town. She tried to reconnect with me, but I wasn't interested. I helped her when she needed it, but I never forgot what she did, and I never let her get close again. For my final revenge, I fixed up the house, repaired everything they had neglected and restored what they had almost ruined. When it was all done, I threw a big Thanksgiving dinner and invited the whole family, everyone except my mother and Daniel, because they didn't deserve a seat at the table. Looking around at my home, filled with people who truly loved me, I knew I had finally won. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe for more great stories. Don't forget to tap the notification bell, so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts in the comments, we love hearing from you. See you next time, and take care.